talk to you a little bit about the PDA and the common mistakes that you should avoid, because it's always a bit tricky, and I've seen several errors in the past. So the first thing to that I absolutely do not want to see is something like take something smaller, something like sigma. The alphabet is like A, B, and epsilon. That's absolutely wrong, because epsilon is not it's the empty string, and it is not a symbol of the alphabet, right? So if you think of it like that, there is already a problem in your understanding of what the empty string is. Okay, so that applies not just for the PDA, but also for the NFA. And of course, then later on, also in some sense for the Turing machine, although the Turing machine uses rather the blank. It's not really, we don't use epsilon anymore. But for the NFA and the PDA, you have epsilon. Now for the NFA, it doesn't really impact your assignment, because you don't implement an NFA, but a DFA, deterministic finite automaton, and the DFA never has epsilon, because epsilon on a finite automaton would make it non-deterministic. That means you could have two different options if you had an epsilon at some point from a certain state. So anyway, so no, it's not part of the alphabet, right? It's epsilon is the empty string, so it's not a symbol. It cannot be a symbol of the alphabet. It just represents the absence of symbol in some sense, right? That means basically nothing, right? You can interpret it as nothing. So if you are at a state, for the case of a finite automaton, Q1, and you go to Q2, say that's a starting state, and you have epsilon here, in the case of NFA, that just means go from Q1 to Q2 without reading anything. That means read nothing and go there, right? But it also means that you can stay here and read nothing, right? So wherever you are in your path, so if you have like here an A and now an epsilon for Q3, that means that if you have the character, A, B, 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 you're going to read A, right? And then once you're here and you read A, when you're at Q2, you go directly to Q3 without reading anything, right? You don't move your cursor to the B, right? Now, if I have B here and Q4, now I am going to move the cursor to the B, right? And I'm now at Q4, okay? But this means just don't read anything and still go to the next one. Okay, so that's for the NFA. For the PDA, it's really the same thing, except that you can not just read nothing, but also pop nothing and push nothing, right? Because it's a push down automata with a stack. You have three positions that are relevant when you consider the transition function from Q1 to Q2. You have what you read, and then a comma in our way to describe it, then what you pop and what you push, right? And so we describe it like that: what you read, what you pop, what you push. And so the epsilon can be at either of these three positions, right? It can be either here, here, or here, or all the three, or two of them. It doesn't matter. But you can read nothing, pop nothing, push nothing, right? So in the case of like regular, regular symbols, I'm not going to talk about that because that's fairly straightforward. I'm going to talk about the case where you have instead an epsilon somewhere, right? Note that when you have an epsilon both at the read and pop, that means in your case, in the case of a DPDA, which is the one you are interested in for your assignment, it's only deterministic case, there is no possibility to have another transition, right? Because if you read nothing and pop nothing, that means that any configuration of your machine, for any configuration, you're going to take that transition. Anyway, you can always take it. Because when you read nothing and pop nothing, whatever is the string, the state of the string, whatever is the state of the stack, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you read nothing and you pop nothing, therefore. So I'm talking about this case, the case where you would have an epsilon both here and here. That's the wrong one. And so in this case, you always have only this transition if you're talking about deterministic PDAs, right? Yeah, really this kind of situation just means go to Q2. And by the way, push down a B here, right? So that's the way you have to understand the epsilon, is in terms of reading nothing and popping nothing, right? And potentially also you could have sometimes also pushing nothing, right? This one doesn't have an impact in terms of determinism because it's not what determines what is a valid transition, right? So you always have to think in terms of valid transition. That's really the way you have to think of it for designing your algorithm. It's really not complicated. Is given the current state of my input string, where I am in the input string, and my stack, what is a valid transition, right? As we said, if you have this, it's always a valid transition, right? Because you pop nothing and you read nothing. But we can have other configurations, like, for instance, if we're here, our cursor is on B, right? So we're reading B. Yeah, right now by the cursor on B, I'm going to mean, I'm reading B. And I have read B, epsilon, so pop nothing, and push down A, right? If I'm here and this is the state of my stack, then that means I'm going to read B. So I'm going to move this here to the next one. I'm going to read B, and I'm going to take that transition. So I'm going to now be here. I'm going to read B. I'm going to pop nothing. So that means I don't touch the stack. And I'm going to push down the A here. Okay? That's what it means. Now, another configuration can be where instead I read nothing, and I read nothing. I'm going to read nothing. I'm still here. I'm going to read nothing, and I'm going to pop B and push down A. So I'm going to just stay here. I don't move my cursor. I'm going to pop this one, right, and replace it with an A instead, right? Because I push down A. So that's just the way you have to think of it. Now, of course, these two are important because they determine, actually these three, determine what is a valid transition. So if you have several transitions here, several options, you're going to take the one, and there is only one because it's a deterministic PDA. So you assume there is only one, right? Of course, there could be several if it was a non-deterministic PDA. But the assignment stipulates that only deterministic PDAs can be read by your program. So I will not test it on non-deterministic. It would actually not work, because if you have non-deterministic, it becomes a nightmare because you have to take two paths at once, and you get into exponential complexity. So there's only one path. So really what you have to do is that you have your table with all your transitions, right? They all have the state, Q something. They all have like something from the alphabet for the input, and then something from the tape alphabet, or the stack alphabet for the popping, and something for the stack alphabet for the pushing, right? And what you have to look at is those three, right? To see if they match the current situation, right? So so you just go here, and then you try all of them. You have your loop that tests until that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, until you find one that works. If you find one that works, you take it, right? So that's always what you do when you're still reading your until you're done. There is none that work, and you're at the end of the string. Like if you've done all of the table and you're at the end of the string, then you stop. You check if you're at an accept state. If you are, then you accept. If you're not, you reject. That's as simple as that. So you just go through all of them and you check the only one that can work, if there is one that can work, right? And how do you check that? Well, it's really easy. Is it, is it the current state I'm in, Q1? Yes, so that's good. Is it reading? Is it reading the proper string? Well, it's reading nothing, so it's always good. Reading nothing always work, whatever the situation, whether you're at the beginning or at the end of the string, right? So reading nothing always work. You can always read nothing, and it's popping B. So let's say that's not there. I have a B here. It's popping B. Yes, that's correct. I have a B here. So popping B, reading nothing, and state Q1, all good. So I can do it, right? And then you just have to apply that transition function and push down the A. Okay, so it's really not different really in terms of this process, which you should already have in your DFA, right? It's more or less it's more like that doesn't work very well. This is more or less like the DFA, this process, except it's a bit more complex, because instead of just checking this and this, right, you also have to check this one in addition. But really what is important to understand is that you always have this process. You always do that at each point, right? So you should not make it too complicated for yourself, like, oh, what do I do when I have an epsilon? Why do I don't have an epsilon? You don't need to make several cases. You just need to have some kind of way to check if this is valid, given that when you have an epsilon basically means you can take it, right? So an epsilon basically you can skip checking, because an epsilon is always, you can always read nothing, you can always pop nothing, right? So again, of course, if you're at a transition Q5 and there is an epsilon, you're automatically going to take it if you're at Q5. Automatically, because epsilon is always, you can consider it as it matches any circumstances, any situation. So you can always take that path, right? So you just skim through, you take the first one that is valid, and you take it and you just apply the transition. I hope this is helpful. Again, really don't want to see anything so if you understood any of what I just said and what epsilon means, which is the empty string, this something like that should really hurt your eyes, right? It's absolutely not meaningful. There's no meaning, right? This is the empty string. It means read nothing. So you can't, it doesn't belong to the alphabet again, right? It doesn't belong to the alphabet. So now the empty string, we use it to describe some transition functions. Sometimes you also just to finish on the empty string, to make sure it's understood, you can also see it as a way to describe what is accepted by your language, right? So you can have, for instance, the language that accepts empty string A, AB, and BB, say, right? That means that your machine, given the way it's designed, is going to accept all of those strings plus the empty string. So what it means usually is that you're going to have the start state that is also an accept state. That means when you start, it's already accepted. You can just enter the empty string and it's going to be accepted. You could have situations where it's not the case. For instance, if this is not an accept state, but you have some kind of epsilon to Q2, and this is an accept state, well, this machine is also going to accept the empty string because you basically don't do anything and you still take the transition. So there are several ways of expressing that, and then you can have the rest for those. So that you can see the empty string expressed that way. You can have a language that takes the empty string and only the empty string, right? So the automaton for that is really simple. It's, you know, it would be this one. It's as simple as that. It only takes this and nothing else, right? If you want to make it clearer, you can have something like A, B that goes toward a non-accepting state, right? So that's a language that accepts only the empty string. It is different. So let's call it L1. It's different from L2, which would be the empty set. So it's very important to understand that these two are different. Why? Because L2 doesn't contain any string. Therefore, L2 it's an empty language. So the automaton for that is going to be different. It's going to be just one state that is not, there's no accepting state, right? There's no accepting state, which is possible, right? It's going to be a machine where F, the set of accepting state, is also empty, right? The empty set. Okay, so I hope this clears things up on how PDA works, particularly with empty strings. The last thing you have to be careful with PDA, I already talked about it, but you do have to check not just that you're reading the proper thing, right? So say you have A, you have to check that this is correct. So I'm at A, say I'm here, right? You have to check that this is correct, but also that this is correct, that this is the top of the stack. In our case here, it's not, right? So it's not the top of the stack, so it's not correct, right? Because we have B here, right? So if this is not correct, you cannot pop A, so therefore you cannot take that transition. That transition is not good, right? You have to take maybe, let's say this one. Here, that would not be a deterministic finite automaton, so I would have to delete this one because otherwise there are two options. But if there are only these two options, then I'm gonna take this one because A, B matches, right? So again, you always have to check that both the red symbol, the next symbol, and the next one on the stack, they both match. The third one you don't have to worry about because that's just what you push down after you decide to take the transition. Okay, I think that's it, and I think I covered all the difficulties with PDA. I wish you good luck with the assignment.